In the 70 years that Formula One has been around, nearly 770 drivers have taken part in this highly prestigious sport. Many of these drivers have gone on to make a name for themselves as the greatest drivers of their time. After all, driving an F1 car is no mean feat. Most drivers start out at a very young age, yet only the most promising drivers get the opportunity to be in Formula One, leaving them little to no room for mistakes. However, just like every other sport, accidents do take place due to human error, which are accordingly dealt with by the FAI in terms of penalties or, in rare cases, with a ban. So let's take a look at which drivers faced a ban in Formula One and why they were banned in the first place. Kicking things off with the most recent ban in F1 history, that of Romain Grosjean, following the events of the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix. The Lotus driver had a great start, but moving into turn 1 he left no space for Hamilton, with the two touching tyres and eventually losing control. Grosjean crashed into Perez and went airborne, nearly missing Alonso's head in the scuffle. This entire incident ended the race for 4 cars in the first lap itself, including championship contenders Alonso and Hamilton. The stewards did not take the accident lightly, as Grosjean received a one-race ban as well as a fine of €50,000. Although his punishment was quite harsh, this was the 7th time that Grosjean was involved in a first-lap crash in as many as 12 races, only making things difficult for him. Next up is Ayrton Senna, who, unlike the other drivers in this list, was involved in a rather hands-on altercation with fellow driver Eddie Irvine, leading to Senna's suspended ban. Irvine had just begun his F1 career, having made his first outing at the Japanese GP in 1993 with an impressive 6th place finish. However, race winner Ayrton Senna would not share Irvine's joy, as Senna furiously marched towards the Jordan's team's hospitality suite in search of Irvine. Senna was outraged by Irvine's antics on track, considering that the debutant had unlapped himself twice despite being a back marker. This did not sit well with Senna, who hurled abuses at Irvine while the latter tried to defend himself in a tense confrontation with the 3-time world champion. Things soon reached a boiling point and Senna struck Eddie Irvine with his fist as the rest of the paddock watched the fight unfold. Senna, who was clearly at fault, was promptly handed a suspended 2-race ban for his shocking outburst. Another one of Formula One's greatest drivers in this unfortunate list is none other than Michael Schumacher, who was driving for the Benetton team during the 1994 British GP. In a bizarre sequence of events that were to follow, Schumacher overtook Damon Hill twice during the formation lap and went on to repeat his mistake in the next formation lap. The race officials took note of Schumacher's offence and awarded him a 5-second stop-and-go penalty on lap 14, which he failed to complete. This resulted in him being shown the black flag twice, which meant the end of his race, but Schumacher continued onwards while his teams discussed with the officials. Schumacher finally came into the pits on lap 26 to serve his penalty and finished the race in 2nd place. Sadly for Schumacher, the FIA World Motorsport Council felt differently and disqualified the driver from the British GP. He was sentenced with a 2-race ban and the team was fined $500,000 for ignoring black flags. Schumacher, though, would go on to win the first of his 7 world championships in the very same season. Similar to Schumacher, Mika Häkkinen had quite a bit of bad luck in the 1994 British Grand Prix and the following race in Germany. At Silverstone, Häkkinen put up a strong fight against Rubens Barrichello as both looked towards finishing 4th, only behind Hill, Schumacher and Alesi. On the final lap of the race, the two drivers collided into each other, suffering substantial damage to their cars. While Barrichello pulled into the pits, Häkkinen dragged his car through the finish line, finishing 3rd after Schumacher's disqualification. Häkkinen got a 1-race suspended ban for the incident, but things got worse in the next race as the McLaren driver was responsible for taking out multiple cars. With nearly 10 cars out of the race in the first lap itself, Häkkinen was forced to sit out of the subsequent Hungarian Grand Prix. Eddie Irvine was also one of the 3 drivers to have received a ban in the ill-fated 1994 season. Having been embroiled in Ayrton Senna's suspended race ban in the previous year, Irvine would have his own share of misfortune after the Brazilian GP. The Jordan driver was deemed responsible for causing a 4-car accident by pushing Jos Verstappen into the grass during the race, and for this he received a 1-race ban. The team protested the severity of the decision and appealed to the FIA, which did not do the team any favours, as the FIA upheld the decision, converting Irvine's 1-race ban into a 3-race ban. The 1997 season saw Canadian driver Jacques Villeneuve lead the Drivers' Championship ahead of his rivals. The Williams driver had won plenty of races in the season, cementing his position in the standings. Villeneuve, however, had a slight setback at the Japanese Grand Prix when he failed to slow down in a practice session despite the waving yellow flags. While Villeneuve was not the only driver to have missed the flags, he was the only one who faced a suspended ban at the time, and so would have to bear the consequences. The Williams teams contested the ban, which allowed Villeneuve to race under appeal. Even after taking all the trouble, Villeneuve could not improve his position, finishing only 5th, which prompted Williams to drop the appeal and forfeit the result. This gave Michael Schumacher a 1-point lead going into the controversial season finale of 1997 at Jerez. Further moving on to racing legend Nigel Mansell, the British driver was racing for Ferrari during the 1989 F1 season. Mansell was all set to battle in Portugal that year against Senna and Prost as the three dominated the drivers' standings. Having qualified 3rd behind Senna and Berger, Mansell was well on his way to finish in the podium places if everything went according to plan. But things did not turn out quite as planned when Mansell entered into the pits on lap 40 with a 20-second lead ahead of Berger. The Ferrari driver went slightly past his mark in the pits and quickly reversed the car back to position, which was a clear violation of FIA's rules against reversing in the pit lane. Soon after, Mansell was black flagged from the race, but this did not dissuade him as he pursued Senna and eventually crashed with the McLaren. Mansell's foolishness and ignoring the black flags was properly dealt with by the stewards, who imposed a 1-race ban and a $50,000 fine on the driver. While nearly all of these drivers had officially received a race ban from the FIA, there have been a few instances where that was not the case. Riccardo Patrese ban is one such instance that comes to mind. At the 1978 Italian GP, Patrese's Arrows car went into the McLaren of James Hunt, which created a domino effect on track, accompanied by a 10-car pileup and an injured Ronnie Peterson in the Lotus car. Peterson later died of an embolism, and the aftermath of the race saw popular drivers like Hunt, Lauda, Andretti, Fittipaldi and Scheckter take a stand against Patrese, choosing to withdraw themselves from the next race at the US Grand Prix unless Patrese was banned from the event. The race organisers and the team at Arrows bowed under pressure and banned Patrese unofficially from the race. Later, Patrese would be found not guilty for causing the accident. Just like Patrese, Felipe Massa too would share the distinction of not having raced at the US GP due to an unofficial ban. Massa, who started his F1 ambitions with the Sauber team in 2002, was to be blamed for causing a collision with Jaguar's Pedro de la Rosa early in the year at Monza. This incident earned him a 10-place grid penalty, which the team were desperate to avoid. In a clever interpretation of the rules, Sauber instead chose to let Heinz-Harald Frentzen take over for Massa, as the rules at the time stated that Massa's penalty would apply on the next race, thus forcing Massa to forfeit the race, while Frentzen would go on to take Massa's seat the next year. Last but not least is Super Aguri's Yuji Ide, whose time in F1 lasted only 4 races. Ide shared a close relationship with team owner Aguri Suzuki and was lucky to have got the opportunity despite a lack of testing experience as well as his limited knowledge of English. The driver would soon have his super license revoked by the FIA on account of his dangerous moves on track, cutting short Ide's chances of making it through the season. Now that the FIA has a penalty point system in place, race bans are quite unheard of these days because drivers need to accumulate more than 12 penalty points over the course of a 12-month period to trigger an automatic race ban. Although no driver has faced suspension yet under the new system, Lando Norris did come close at the 2021 Austrian GP after his total came quite near the 10-point mark. This change has allowed drivers to continue racing without severe consequences for minor incidents, unlike their predecessors back in the day. Over the years, the FIA has implemented quite a few safety measures that have greatly reduced the dangers that drivers face, thus eliminating the need to punish drivers for taking small risks. All in all, the drivers and the teams no longer face harsh consequences, allowing them the chance to compete on an equal footing. What do you think about the race bans? Did any of these drivers deserve to receive one for their actions? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it.